The Norfolk County, Massachusetts Superior Courthouse sees demonstrations the likes of which it's probably never seen. Mild-mannered college professor and securities analyst Karen Reed is accused of killing her boyfriend, a 16-year veteran of the Boston Police Department. Tempers flare on both sides. What is going on in this case? What is the evidence?
Karen Reed and what happened that mysterious night. I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
And today we have Doug Cope with us, and we're going to be discussing all the crazy ins and outs of this story. Doug, how are you doing today?
Great. And you're right. There are a lot of crazy ins and outs of this court case, which is ongoing.
Back in January of 2022, it was snowing heavily overnight. And in the morning, it's hard to know where to start this story, but in the morning, it turns out that Karen Reed's boyfriend, John O'Keefe, was found in the snow and dying, and his body was taken to Good Samaritan Hospital down in Brockton, where he was pronounced dead 7:30 in the morning. So I guess we have to backtrack and look at what happened the night before. Doug, do you want to pick it up there, or should I keep going?
She and her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, a Boston police officer, had been out drinking at a local bar with some other people who were also Boston police officers or related to them. And then they were to go back to a friend's house, who was also a Boston police officer, as I recall. Mm-hmm. And then supposedly, as the story went, Karen Reed who had been drinking, vodka tonics all night or something along those lines?
Yep, they've been at two bars, and at the first bar in Canton, the video saw her drinking 6 vodka tonics and a shot. So 6 vodka tonics and a shot at the first bar. Then they went to the second bar, Waterfalls in Canton.
Yeah, nothing like getting into a car after you've had that much alcohol. But she did, and was supposed to drive John O'Keefe home, but instead, as I recall, drove him to another house.
That's right.
But then the story starts to get hazy. Starts to get, what really happened, because supposedly the next morning, Karen Reed wakes up at 4:30 in the morning.
Yes,
I believe it was, and didn't really remember anything from the night before, and is wondering, where's my boyfriend? Where's John? So she wakes up other folks, and they go out and they look for him, and they find his body outside in the snow at a little after 4:30, like 4:45 in the morning, something like that. There was a nor'easter that had been going all night, and as I recall, it was about 18 degrees or so.
Where she had gone was where there had been a party after these two soirees at these two bars in Canton. After the second bar, they left. John O'Keefe left with a glass with a glass in his hand. Yes. That's I get you don't leave a bar with a glass in your hand. You're supposed to under the liquor regulations you're supposed to the liquor regulations don't allow a bar to allow the liquor to leave, but I guess he's a Boston police officer, so he figures, it's not a problem. So that's an important little detail that'll come up again in a few minutes. He leaves the bar with a cocktail glass in his hand. So they drive over to where they're going to have the after party at Brian Albert's house, and Brian Albert is also a Boston police officer.
Yeah.
Right. So they go over to that house on Fairview Drive in Canton. Karen and her boyfriend John were not sure whether they were going to go in or not go in. So depending on who you talk to or listen to, Karen's Lexus stopped out front. And depending on who you talk to, most of the evidence is that John never went in. Apparently, one of the witnesses said that the Lexus pulled up in front of the Brian Albert house and stopped, and there were observations that she had her hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel. And according to the mainstream evidence, John never made it into the house. And Karen, after having that many drinks, and at some point, I guess in the documents in court, she said she had a stomach ache. Does that surprise you?
No.
I have a stomach ache if after 6 drinks after like the course of 7 hours. Like
So she went back home to John's house. That's where she hung out because she lived down in Mansfield, which is a bit of a drive. So she went over to his house where, as you pointed out, she crashed, and then she woke up at 4:30 in the morning. And as you pointed out, he wasn't around. She made some phone calls. A few of them went back over, and they find the body, and he ended up passing out. And some of the evidence was that the tail light, the right rear tail light on her car, was broken.
Right.
And some of the pieces of the tail light were scattered around where he had been found.
And they found microscopic pieces of that tail light on his clothing, supposedly, according to the prosecution.
And they found one of his hairs in the rear of her car. And remember what I said, the glass that he walked out, the cocktail glass that he walked out of the bar with would come back in a few minutes? Well, a few minutes have gone by, and they found pieces of glass from that cocktail glass embedded in the bumper of her Lexus. So put it all together, Mr. Prosecutor, and they charged her, and she was taken to the Stoughton District Court, and she was arraigned several days later. I believe it was on February 1st. And the initial charges, I have a lot of the court papers here, actually.
I believe it was second-degree manslaughter, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, the original charges, there were 3. Manslaughter, leaving the scene of a motor vehicle accident causing death, and motor vehicle homicide. And those were the initial charges when this was at the district court level. Then, of course, time goes by and April comes along and she's indicted by a grand jury, and the charges now change. The charges are now second-degree murder. The others are not as relevant, motor vehicle manslaughter and leaving the scene of an accident causing death. But second-degree murder ratcheted this case up. So that's when things got a little bit crazy. Before then, I don't want to say there's any such thing as a run-of-the-mill murder case, because there's really not. But it was, the kind of murder case that we see in Superior Court in Massachusetts. This happened. But when the second-degree murder charge was brought up, that's when Karen reached out to a new attorney. I guess we skipped over the fact that her initial attorney was a very well-known Boston criminal defense attorney. His name is David Yannetti, and his original defense was that this was not an intentional killing, that she backed into her boyfriend by accident, and that's all it was. And so it looked like the leaving the scene of an accident charge was the one that he was looking at, because it certainly, he didn't believe that it was manslaughter. Well, when the charges were ratcheted up now to second-degree murder, that carries a potential life sentence. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but that carries a life sentence. Unlike first-degree murder, second-degree murder in Massachusetts holds the potential for parole, but it's a life sentence. So nobody wants that hanging over her head. So what did she do? She called Los Angeles. I guess she knew of an attorney by the name of Alan Jackson, who had defended some Hollywood folks. And he enters the scene. And from there, the defense got a little bit different, I guess I'll say. How would you characterize it, Doug?
Well, they started to spread their contention that this was all a conspiracy and a cover-up, and that John O'Keefe had actually been beaten up inside that home and bitten by a dog, and the body dumped outside, and his police and state police friends were trying to cover this up and frame Karen Reed for the whole case. So that's how this changed. And when that happened, this became a very divisive case that divided people quite distinctly in the town of Canton, because it seems that pretty much everybody involved in this case was a local Canton person, Canton resident. They'd grown up there, and the town, people know what other people are doing, or they don't, and so they get involved in other people's lives. And so now this case has completely blown up into a public case of whether you're for Karen Reed or against Karen Reed. And that is my whole problem with this case, and a large aspect of this case that we'll talk about, how this case is pretty much being tried in the media.
Now, you were a reporter at a big radio station in Boston for years and years and years and years. You were in that business for a long time. I've been practicing law for 30 years. And before that, I was a reporter for a short period of time, much less time than you, but I did spend some time in the TV business. I've been practicing law for 30 years, and I have been in and out of the superior courts in Massachusetts. And I have actually, gone into court most of my cases are civil cases. I've done some criminal cases, but most of my cases are civil cases, and that's what I try. And I've gone into court the same day that criminal cases are being tried, and some high-profile cases. And sometimes I've gone into court, and all the media trucks are there, all the big TV stations are there, and sometimes you trip over their power cables, and I always look around to see if I know any of the, the cameramen or the reporters. But usually they're inside, and everybody's behaving themselves. You go into the court, and there's some decorum in the court. And so I've never seen, going into the superior courts in and around Greater Boston, I've never seen anything like this, Doug. Demonstrations out on the front steps, people yelling, people screaming, people holding signs.
I find that really unbelievable. I have never seen anything like that either. And what we're talking about is during court hearings, pretrial hearings, in this case outside of Dedham Superior Court, Norfolk County Superior Court in Dedham, there have been a number of local people from Canton, holding Free Karen Reed signs and chanting and supporting her, wearing Free Karen Reed sweatshirts and T-shirts. I have never seen public demonstrations of this type really in any court case. And it shows you what all the pretrial publicity has done in this case in creating a furor in the town of Canton. And now we must bring up the topic of Turtleboy.
Oh boy, here we go.
Turtleboy is it is.
The elephant in the room, so to speak.
Now, as we record this program, in fact, a gentleman named Aidan Timothy Kearney, who is from the Worcester area in Massachusetts.
I believe he's from Holden. I think he lives in Holden. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
As we record this program, he is being arraigned in court.
I wonder why.
He's being arraigned in court on charges of conspiracy and potential witness tampering. Because Turtleboy, which is the name of his internet blog, if you will, or he also has a YouTube channel, and he's been doing this for several years now as a quote unquote journalist, self-proclaimed journalist, who has been outing people for various and sundry alleged crimes over the last few years, and has built up a following. And he's been very successful at it. And he has been the recipient of all of Karen Reed's attorneys' contentions in this case. Basically, Karen Reed's attorneys have been feeding Turtleboy their information in the case and presenting their view of the case to Turtleboy. And Turtleboy has been publishing whatever they tell him without any kind of constraints at all. In fact, he has had 179 posts about the Karen Reed case. And some of his posts have been 4-letter word filled rants,
Let me jump in here. Let me just jump in here and just disagree with you a little bit. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, Doug.
Okay.
It'll make the program more interesting. I do not want to disparage any other member of the bar. I'm a licensed attorney in Massachusetts and New Hampshire.
Yes.
And I'm not certain that it was the attorneys that fed him by Turtleboy's own statements. He was sitting around at his house one day, and he heard about this case, and he actually went online and found the documents, and he spent a day going through the doc. Anyone can go online and get not all documents, but many documents in cases in Massachusetts are available publicly. And his story is that that's what he did, and he spent a day reading all of the documents, and there are a ton of them. I myself have downloaded a bunch of them here.
Yep.
This is just a small amount, but these are all the court documents that I've downloaded, and that's just a small amount.
Why does he have to go on these 4-letter word rants?
Well, because I'm not going to justify that at all, because it's just, I'm going to read some of them in a second.
Yeah.
But he himself decided that he would do this, and he decided that his followers would like this. And sure enough, he was able to inflame the number of his followers to 1.5 million, and he was getting as many as 20,000 views per episode. But it would seem that he did a lot of this on his own, with the motive not necessarily of helping the defense attorneys so much as, from what I've heard and read and observed, boosting his own profile on the internet. And I think you used the word journalist, and I know you didn't mean it, but he calls himself a journalist, and I know you were a journalist, you taught journalism. I worked as a journalist briefly before going to law school. Here's some quotes from this individual. Here's some of his quotes.
Be careful.
I'm going to. I know all of George Carlin's 7 dirty words, but they're not going to be aired here. In any event, here's a direct quote, edited a little bit. With the O'Keefes, enough of the F-pity party for these F people. The only good part about John not being alive is that he doesn't have to be around you useless maggots for a second time. F you, F your high horse, burn in hell. The beauty, he said, of Turtleboy is, who would come up with a name of Turtleboy? But anyhow, the beauty is that I can do things in an unconventional manner that other journalists are restricted from doing. I love being the center of attention and being theatrical and performing. This is what I was made to do. So I don't know any journalists that, are out to perform and entertain and, be theatrical and kind of inflame. My understanding of journalism, and it's been, as you know, a few years since I graduated with a media degree, not a journalism degree. My understanding was that the journalist's lot in life was to ask what, where, when, how, who, why, and then report those observations. A journalist makes observations and digests them and then reports them. A journalist isn't out there to inflame both sides.
Yeah, this guy operates with no code of ethics, with no rules or regulations upon him, with no FCC. He can basically do whatever he wants. And that the other very unusual thing about this case was that the district attorney for Norfolk County, Michael Morrissey, released a video. I believe, was that back in August? I think it might have been.
Yes.
Basically saying, hey, without naming Turtleboy or Mr. Kearney, saying, hey, cut it out. You've got to stop doing this because you are potentially intimidating potential witnesses in this case. Now,
let's take a look at that statement. Hang on. Let's take a look at what he said.
Yeah. The harassment of witnesses in the murder prosecution of Karen Reed is absolutely baseless. It should be an outrage to any decent person, and it needs to stop. We try people in the court and not on the internet for a reason. The internet has no rules of evidence. The internet has no punishment for perjury. And the internet does not know all the facts. It needs to stop now.
I've never seen a district attorney issue a video of this type before a case is tried. I mean, this is very unusual. Very unusual. I mean, quite often, I mean, usually, well, you're an attorney, you would know, usually evidence in the case and the particulars of a case don't come out before the case is tried, and quite often, even before arraignments, quite often you don't know the charges of someone in court before arraignments are made. So this is very unusual that, he actually felt that he had to make this video, release it, and basically implore people not to intimidate witnesses. And as we have said, this guy, Turtleboy, is not bound by really any rule. As he said, there is no rule of law on the internet, and cases are tried in the courts and not on the internet or in the public. So, but unfortunately,
I don't want this to turn into I don't want to have this whole thing. Go ahead.
Well, unfortunately, with the
ahead.
power that social media has now, there are a lot of people who have taken Turtleboy's rants and raves for full face value, and it has helped to gin up all of the discord that is going on in the town of Canton, where longtime friends and longtime residents aren't speaking to each other because of how they feel about the Karen Reed case. I mean, it's gotten out of control.
Doug, the only thing is that before this individual who does the blogging and podcasting got involved, the attorneys that represent Karen Reed were already having problems. And David Yannetti, her first defense attorney, pointed out in open court that he was getting resistance from the police.
I couldn't even get a police report. They claimed that no police reports had been written. They fought me when I tried to get search warrant affidavits. They stalled and delayed and hindered our ability to fight the narrative that they had put out there.
And so, Doug, there were some issues in this case before this podcaster got involved. It would appear that there were already problems here. The police were involved. The police were, a police officer owned the house. Mr. O'Keefe was a police officer. So there was some additional attention here. And when Karen Reed went to her initial arraignment in Stoughton District Court, they did not give her attorney a police report, which is, you get that police report. You have a right to know what the charges against your client are. So that was a little bit touchy, I'll say. That was a little bit something that was a little bit different from the way things normally are. And so something is wrong with this case. And I don't know. I had the idea that we could do a guilty and not guilty list. Here's mine. But why don't you guys?
Yeah,
why don't you
have
start?
a very extensive list there. I'm guessing you're an attorney, aren't you?
No.
Oh,
Yes.
that's the whole point of this. Yes.
Yeah, I might be an attorney, but I lost my pen. Okay, I have my pen. All right,
Anybody can lose a pen. That's okay.
Okay.
Well, let's go through your list and see, see what we got.
Well, all right. The first thing that would tend to point towards her guilt is the broken tail light and fragments found near the body. That is something that definitely helps the police. The second thing that I think helps the police is her credibility. I mean, she had 6 drinks and a shot at the first bar, McCarthy's, and that's what we know that she had at McCarthy's. Then they went to the Waterfall. And so credibility is always, always, always an issue. And so that I put over on the side of guilty. Any other points that you'd like to make before I go forward?
No, these facts of the case,
For guilty specifically?
Yeah.
I'll let you continue with guilty.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move over to the not guilty side, and I'm going to play devil's advocate because you people seem to have her behind bars for the rest of her life. And my mind is open. I'll be really honest with you and tell you my mind is open on this one. The injuries that she had are just simply not consistent with just being backed into by a car. I know that I've seen some experts talking about this case, and in most cases where a pedestrian's hit by a car, the injuries are below the waist, around the knee. This guy's injuries were to his head. He had a broken skull. He had 2 black eyes, which is normal with a skull injury. He had injuries on his right arm that I don't think can be explained by being hit by a car. The injuries on his arm are said to look more like a dog. And they said that maybe a dog got into the attack. So I do not think that the injuries in this case are consistent with guilt. One of the big things that weighs towards her being not guilty, at 2:27 in the morning, we're talking about the morning, between the time they had their little party at the house and the time that the body was found, there is an internet search by Jennifer McCabe that says, Haas, H-O-S, a misspelling, how long to die in the cold? Now, why was somebody internet searching at 2:27 in the morning unless they knew something? How long does it take for a body to die in the cold? That search was deleted, and that was only found later when there were forensic analyses of the computer.
Well, yeah, I mean, that it might be questionable, but as you know, being an attorney, that doesn't prove anything.
I think it does. And in fact, I was watching a very well-known TV guy who everybody knows his name, so I don't need to say it, on Court TV, had done a very well done, I must say, podcast on this case. And he held that until the very end. And he said, there is a fact that you must know. And that is, overnight, while he was outside dying in the cold, someone inside the house did a Google search, how long to die in the cold. I think that's a big thing. I really do.
So,
what do you mean so?
Well, I mean,
how do you explain that to a jury, Mr. Cope?
Well, I don't know.
You don't know. Okay.
You can do a search for anything you want on your computer, and it doesn't mean.
Oh, come on! In the middle of the night, you do a search. How long for a body to die? Other things on the side of not guilty. Other injuries include a cut above the eye and a cut on the left side of the nose. That looks like somebody punched him right in the face. I'm sorry. That weighs in favor of him going into the house and someone in the house getting into a fight, punching him. The dog gets in the fight.
What if the taillight shattered and the taillight, what's left of the taillight in the car is sharp, and it, cut his face?
Really?
I don't know. I wasn't there. The problem is, nobody was there who saw it, who can testify about it. So everything is speculative, isn't it?
Well, there's only 2 points for guilty, and I'm already in the 3rd point on not guilty. Do you want me to go forward?
Sure, keep going.
The 4th point is that the a skull does not fracture without a significant impact. So if one's pushed backwards by a car, the question is whether the impact could be strong enough. And I heard an expert say that just being pushed back by a car is not a significant enough impact to fracture the skull to the extent that John O'Keefe's skull was fractured. There is no lower body injury consistent with a pedestrian vehicle strike. The defense...
Maybe he was leaning over at the time, Maybe, you're assuming he's standing upright, but here's a guy who had been drinking all night long, and who knows at what point his body was at that time.
All right, you're arguing. I'm talking facts. These are facts. You're arguing, and there's only 2 bullet points for guilty so far. I'm down at the 5th bullet point for not guilty. Do you want me to go forward? Okay, all right. Okay. The Apple Health data on John O'Keefe's phone shows that after the girlfriend left, Karen Reed, he walked 80 steps and he went up and down 3 flights of stairs. Now, he didn't do that out in the cold. He must have gone into that house.
I didn't know that detail.
The Apple phone of John O'Keefe, the data showed that he walked 80 steps and that he went up and down 3 flights of stairs.
But now my confusion is, I thought that the phone, that they pinged the phone and at no point the phone had been inside the house. You're saying like his Apple Watch, like what his tracking device knew that he had been moving.
Yep.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Well, but at what point did he, were there stairs outside the house? I don't know.
No.
Just
No,
going
it's a
up and down the
suburban.
porch.
No, it's a suburban
Help.
house. All right. Again, that was my 5th bullet point for not guilty. And all I hear is argument. I don't hear any more bullet points for guilty. So I'll go forward. As to whether or not the tail light on her Lexus was broken after she left the house, the prosecution did release a videotape from the Canton Library showing traffic out on the street. And there's a 2-minute gap in the videotape between 12:37 and 12:39. There is a gap in the videotape from the Canton Library surveillance camera, and the defense is claiming that the Lexus with the undamaged taillight would have been shown going by the library at that time. Yeah. Shall I go on, or are you folks going to bring up some facts on the guilty side?
Keep going.
Okay. All right.
I have a not guilty defense.
Yeah, what's that?
Because when she went to go look for him, she, from my understanding of the case, went to his body and was trying to warm up his body with her body.
Oh, yes.
And if you think you killed someone, that's a little intense to be going up crying to someone who you think you probably killed, trying to keep them warm, instead of just knowing that they're dead.
That's good. I didn't have that on my bullet points, but I'll have to add that. Telling right after, and I wasn't there, I don't know. You're right. I don't know. I wasn't there. I can't be a witness. I won't be a witness. However, I find it somewhat odd that the dog that is said to possibly have attacked Mr. O'Keefe was gotten rid of right away. He was they just got rid of the dog. And the Brian Albert house, 1, they replaced the floor in the basement. 2, they sold it right away. Because they were
selling the house. The house went on the market before this incident.
Well, but they
make arrangements. Didn't they make arrangements for the dog before this incident?
Not that I know of. No.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. That's a fact that's in dispute. The Commonwealth refused to allow access to tissue samples from his arm for the DNA analysis as to whether or not the dog did attack him.
Well, didn't they say that they just hadn't completed the analysis yet?
No, they wouldn't allow the tissue samples to be released. And my final point for not guilty is that the Commonwealth successfully opposed the defendant's request for cell phone records of Brian Albert. The defense had a motion that they argued in court asking for the cell phone records of Brian Albert, and they also wanted to subpoena Verizon and AT&T. Now, if those would have helped, why would the prosecution have so vociferously and successfully argued against that motion? There's a lot of crazy things in this case. I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of crazy things in this case, and I don't think we can just dismiss it so easily as, oh, some crazy YouTuber. I don't think we can do that.
Well, my problem with the crazy YouTuber is not necessarily about the facts of the case, but what he is doing, dividing the townspeople of Canton and making this a public spectacle before it has even gone to trial, and in essence, ginning up the media and the public before the trial date. I mean, that's what I really find distasteful in this entire case. There are a lot of questions. I mean, as we said previously, I mean, my first thought was she accidentally backed over him and she didn't know it because she had been drinking so much. And he wound up in the snowbank and then realized hours later, oh, gee, where is he? And he'd been in the snowbank the whole time. To come up with a story that he was actually beaten up and his body dumped there, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
a little far-fetched. And you would think that, and supposedly there was a state police trooper who was an investigator, who was also allegedly in on the cover-up. I can't think if you're a state police investigator and other Boston police officers, you're actually going to go through this and try to make this stick. it just smells. The whole thing smells.
Well,
You
I
know?
think the whole thing does smell, but I'm not really sure. I mean, need I remind you of the incident with Annie Ducan a few years ago,
Yes.
where I mean, the system itself has problems. We have to acknowledge that there have been some issues in the past with Boston police officers. When Annie Ducan was at the State Police Crime Laboratory, she was faking the drug tests. She was just absolutely faking them. And look at all the people that had to go free because of that. And then there was the other drug tester out in the western part of the state that was not only faking the tests, but doing the drugs by her own admission. And so you've got to admit that there are questions within that system, but at the same time, I think that the emotions are way too high on both sides. I'd like to see. That was the purpose of my bullet point list, which you guys never really came back to me with anything on guilty. I think I had more bullet points on
microplastics.
I had a lot more on not guilty than you had on guilty, but I have more. But what I'm saying is I think there should be more time for analysis and less time for just the emotional side of it. This guy that you had mentioned, whose name I'm not even going to mention, the guy who was charged with harassing the witnesses, he'd actually gone around and he had gone with a bunch of people behind him in his Lexus. He'd gone to the homes of Brian Albert, Michael Proctor, the state police officer, Jennifer McCabe. And each stop, he was going to these people's houses, shouting into a bullhorn, detailing how each person was covering up the murder. And then he went to the police department and yelled into his bullhorn. So I'm offended. I mean, we're in a society now where everybody's offended. I'm offended that he calls himself a journalist because he's not. A journalist, like I said before, a journalist makes observations, whether you're going to a fire or a murder or a city council meeting, you observe what's going on. Maybe you're on the I team of the Globe and you're doing a fantastic, expose. What you do is you observe the meat inspector stuffing the steaks in the back of his car. You don't yell at the guy. Do you remember that case?
Yes. Yeah.
And
well, that's sadly, that's this guy's MO. I mean, this is what he's been doing for years.
Well, I'm just saying that's
a name for himself. And now he has this case as a major platform to raise his profile even further.
Well, I'm not even in that business anymore, but I'm offended that a person like that, whose name will not be spoken here, calls himself a journalist, because there are good journalists and there are other journalists, but what they do is they observe and they report. And as we speak, it's unfortunate that there are some of them over in the Middle East that are, risking their lives to observe and stand by their very brave camera people and report back. That's a journalist. That is a journalist. You can't legitimately call yourself a journalist if all you're doing is yelling the F-bomb at people and going to witness's house with a bullhorn. I've never known a journalist with a bullhorn. Have you?
No. And this, I don't know if you're familiar with Mayor Wu in Boston also had this problem with people demonstrating outside her house at night and yelling things at her kids and things, which is completely inappropriate. I mean,
right.
You can disagree with her programs and policies, but you shouldn't be outside her house, ranting and raving and carrying signs. So sadly, this is what has become the norm in our society. As we know, everyone is a victim.
Oh, good grief. That's why I was saying I was offended by being called a journalist. But the point I also want to make, though, is that there are inflamed tempers on both sides of this issue. I was watching a podcast the other day in preparation for this. I just wanted to not only learn the facts, but get a feel for, how strongly people felt. And there was another podcast by a guy who has had some experts on it. He had an expert on this podcast, and he also had two attorneys, one of whom will go unnamed, but she is an attorney, a well-known attorney in Boston, and also a professor at one of the Boston law schools. And she just went on and on and on for she's guilty, she's guilty, she's guilty. And she, the other people couldn't even get a word in edgewise. And she just kept going on and on and on and on. And in the comments section of this particular podcast, people were saying, can't you shut her down and let somebody else get a word in edgewise? And so, and they couldn't. The guy that was conducting that podcast just was unable to control her. Like, if I wanted to, I could turn you off, but I won't.
Well, I have to tell you, as we're sitting here recording this, I am looking on the social media now known as X,
right,
formerly Twitter, and I do see a tweet saying the judge denies prosecution request for bail and GPS monitoring, but ordering Kearney, that's Turtleboy, to have no contact with any of the people in the Karen Reed case. Case is back in court on December 5th. Now, the only problem with that is, as you said earlier, you don't necessarily have to have contact with the people involved in the case. I mean, obviously, you're not supposed to tamper with witnesses, but he is getting a lot of this information from public documents that you can access on the internet, and then he's going with it and doing his rants and raves without presenting both sides. So, yeah, he was in court today. Maybe he'll cut back on his ranting and raving, or maybe this will inspire him to do more.
I would posture a guess that it's B. I will guess that it is B. I don't think
it could be.
I might be wrong. I don't think he's stupid enough to continue to conduct himself the way he's conducted himself in front of the witnesses, but I would guess that he's not going to stop.
I don't know this person in particular, but it reminds me recently there was like a little story of this prankster YouTuber who goes up to people, puts their phone in the face and recording and making comments.
Yeah.
He did this to someone, and that person shot him, walked away. That person only got charged with having a gun in a public space like a mall or whatever. Like, he didn't get charged for shooting him because it was self-defense. And one of the videos afterwards where they're interviewing the mother, like, oh, how do you feel about the ruling? She's like, we respect their decision. And you just see the prankster in the background making a face like trying to be funny, trying to be goofy. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of our turtle friend over here, how he wants to put on a spectacle. Now, I think that if he's legally bound not to intervene, he's going to probably try to hide his own identity from it, but who's to say he's not going to go on anonymous message boards and keep stirring up the drama?
Right.
Well, yeah. I mean, does he become a martyr in this case now? I mean,
they're trying to silence him.
I don't know. I guess only time will tell. This is on for trial. You just mentioned there's a status conference in December, and then it's on for trial in March. So we will see. There's a number of months in the holiday season and the early part of next year between now and then. I don't know. I'm guessing that it may be a little bit difficult to find a jury, but then again, I don't know. Doug, what do you think of the possibility of finding a fair, impartial jury here?
Well, with many high-profile cases, it's always said that, how you're going to find a jury. But, they found a jury for Whitey Bulger, and they found a jury for Yohar Zanayev. So, I think they'll probably find a jury. I mean, I've done jury duty 8 separate times. So, and have actually been picked for 3 juries. Only served on one as a foreman in a civil case. The other 2 cases, I was thrown off by a defense attorney after I was picked on one. And the other case, we all filed into court, and all of a sudden the case had been continued for a couple of months, and so we all got to go home.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Wasn't that great?
I've had similar experiences. I have to point out that Tsarnaev, if I'm not mistaken, is still pursuing an appeal, claiming that it was an unfair, impartial jury in Boston because that's where the marathon was held. And so the judge was in error for not granting the change of venue. So he's still pursuing it. Whitey we'll forget about because, well, we all know what happened to Whitey.
Yeah.
But with Tsarnaev, I can't see a change in venue being effective there or anywhere. And I know that a lot of attorneys don't agree with me, but in the horse and buggy days, a change of venue was great because the news was, a town crier in the local newspaper, and that was it. So if you went from Dedham over to Norwood, maybe they hadn't heard of what had gone on in Dedham, but these days the Boston Marathon is an international event. So, people heard about the Boston Marathon on all of the continents and everywhere on earth. So I don't know if changing venue would have changed things with Mr. Tsarnaev.
Tsarnaev is also appealing the death penalty, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he can appeal that all he wants. Anyhow, any final words? Are we done?
I guess we're done. I mean, it's going to be very interesting when this case does go to trial, and I hope it does go to trial next March and is not postponed. I mean, that could also happen as well, that it could be postponed for some reason or other. But, we're not really going to hear the facts of this case completely until it goes into a public trial, and you can be sure it will get a lot of coverage.
Yeah, that's true. There are a lot of facts in the pleadings. There are a lot of facts that are not developed, and you're right. Often you don't hear actually what the true allegations are until you get to the trial. But a lot of the facts are, in fact, embodied in the pleadings, and some journalists have done a fairly good job. People that are actually journalists have actually done a good job. I mean, I have some of the motions that have been brought both by the prosecution and by the defense, and they're available online. They're available to the public. They're not available just to me because I'm an attorney. They're available to the public. And so that kind of stuff is presented in a fairly straightforward kind of a way, because you're not allowed to, can I say BS? When you're filing these papers in court to a judge, you're really not allowed to get away with a whole lot of BS. They want it straight. They want it, cut and dried. And so the facts are available, but I have to admit that if all you do is read the facts and read the pleadings and report that, you're not going to get 10, 100,000 million views or however many this individual did on YouTube. So it's out there. And Doug, I think you and I both mentioned an article that we had read, among other things, in preparing in the Boston Magazine. And there have been other, responsible publications that have covered this. So that information is out there, but unfortunately there is an audience for the more inflammatory stuff, and it's unfortunate.
Well, yes, sadly. I mean, it may be the law, it may be news, but it's also entertainment.
Yeah. Well, it always has been. The courthouse has always been in the town square traditionally, and people for entertainment, even in the old horse and buggy days for entertainment, people went down to the courthouse and kind of watched because it was entertainment. Anywho, thank you very much, folks, for joining us. We will follow this and some other cases as time goes on. Lainey?
Yeah, no, I mean, I do want to mention, just because I know somebody in the comments is going to probably bring it up, but there are other pieces of evidence that we didn't really necessarily go into: angry phone calls, angry voicemails to the victim, and some suspicious text messages. So if you guys want to hear more about this story and more about the evidence, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you want to hear in the comments, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you so much for Doug joining us today.
Thank you, Doug. Yes, you're absolutely right. There's a lot more to this case. We could talk for 3 hours, but we won't bore you anymore this time. Tell us what you want to hear about next time down in the comments. And please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you. You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts, and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney-myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions.